It's time for Waking Up with Wesley. Today's forecast and weather-wise discussion with WLOX First Alert Weather's senior meteorologist, Wesley Williams.
Waking Up with Wesley is sponsored by Exclusive Auto Brokers. For the best deals on wheels, visit Exclusive Auto Brokers on Beatline Road in Long Beach.
Hello there, South Mississippi, and thank you for waking up with Wesley. I'm Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. This morning has looked really nice. Look at this sunrise time lapse over Biloxi. Well, it's really just a little bit after sunrise. Right there along the beach, and just a beautiful morning. Here's a look at what we're expecting today. Temperatures rising to the lower 90s, so it will be hot, but might not stay that way. So here's what I'm watching for you as we go into the next few days. There is going to be a drop away from these 90-degree temperatures eventually. For now, still looking at the next 4 days, still seeing highs mainly near 90. But once we go beyond the next 4 days, there are some signs that we might be able to get away from some of those hotter 90-degree temperatures. Here's a look at what's happening now. During the 8 o'clock hour, temperatures are in the 70s. For many of us, it's slightly warmer, slightly muggier than it was yesterday morning. It's hard to beat yesterday morning. It was the coolest morning we saw in months. We almost tied a record high in a place like the Gulfport Airport. They had a record low. We almost tied a record low at a place like the Gulfport Airport. They had a low temperature of 67. The record was 66, so they were only 1 degree away from tying that. Here's a look at the setup this morning. There's a high pressure system. That's the one that has been close to our region all week, helping us to kind of stay with that little bit drier feel. Well, today that high pressure is moving a little bit away from us. There's a cool front coming in from the north. And as this front comes in from the north, it's kind of shoving that high a little bit farther away. The front is not going to come down toward our coast. It is instead going to move from west to east. So that motion is what kind of moved that high pressure a little bit farther away from us today. And so that is what might allow for some of the humidity to get around the edge of that high and come through the Gulf and come up to parts of the coast. Now, I will say the brunt of that Gulf humidity is mainly crashing along the coast of Louisiana and Texas. That's where the majority of that is. In Mississippi and Alabama, we're just to the east of that, so might not have the complete brunt of that type of humidity, but it is still there. We got the numbers to prove it. Noticing that we see these dew points into the lower 70s in places like Houston and Lafayette. We're barely with a dew point of 70 in Gulfport. So not quite as muggy as those areas to our west, but it is an increase. And we are expecting this increase to kind of continue. I wonder what it looks like if we take a look at the dew points over the last 24 hours just to see what the trend shows. And yeah, you can kind of make out that entire trend over the last 24 hours. Really ever since noon yesterday, the dew points have been on a steady increase. So it has turned a little bit muggier than yesterday, and it's going to stay that way for the entire weekend. We were mentioning this. If you look back at Tuesday's edition of Waking Up with Wesley, we were mentioning that we are going to see this kind of increasingly muggier pattern toward the end of the week. As far as rain's concerned, there's not much of that out there as far as the next 2 to 3 days. Today, we call the rain coverage maybe about 10 to 20% at best. So most of us get no rain at all for Thursday. For Friday, looks like we'll call it about a 10 to 30% chance. That would be a 10 to 20% chance on the coast and a 20 to 30% chance inland. And then on Saturday and Saturday night, still looks like only about a 10 to 30% chance with a 10 to 20% on the coast and a 20 to 30% chance inland. So not that high of a rain chance over the next 3 days. On your 7-day forecast, it just kind of looks like this, basically 20%, with it being a little bit lower today, a little bit higher Friday, Saturday, but not even enough to really change the 20%. All right, but the big moment that some of you have been waiting for, a cool front to come, it is looking like it might move into the area around Sunday, and then after Sunday, we get to feel some of the effects of that cool front. So Still hot for Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Still going to see those lower 90s each of those days. But then by the time we get to next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe not as many 90s. So something to look forward to there. And it might continue into next week, not just with less afternoon heat, but also with a drier feel in the air. Perhaps some lower humidity is a possibility as well. And as far as the morning temperatures are concerned, notice at the bottom there, we're looking at 72 Friday morning, 73 Saturday morning, 73 Sunday morning, and then some upper 60s Monday morning. So after Sunday's cool front, maybe Monday morning might turn out cooler when we start the new week next week. Now, this 7-day forecast is for the coast. All the temperature numbers you see are for places that are generally to the south of I-10. But what about inland areas? They're usually cooler in the morning. Let's take a look. You see the next 4 mornings, 72, 73, 73, 69. Well, now we're going to take a look at the inland areas and see the difference. So inland areas are about 70 on Friday morning, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, but oh boy, Monday morning of next week, finding morning low temperatures in the middle 60s. So yeah, Monday morning, cooler for everyone, but the coolest temperatures are going to be generally near or to the north of Interstate 10, basically away from the coastal waters. That's where you're going to find some of the coolest temperatures next Monday morning. And we can take a look at the rest of the 10-day forecast. There's some nuance once we go to next week, but I do think that the general trend next week is going to be a mostly dry week. You've got the entirety of Monday through Friday of next week. This is Monday through Friday north of I-10 and Monday through Friday down closer to the coast. And you're noticing most of the mornings next week on the coast will be in the 60s. The only exception is Wednesday morning. And inland, you're noticing most of the mornings next week will be in the middle 60s. The only exception being next Wednesday morning. So other than next Wednesday morning, what we're going to see is basically we start the week next week with a push of drier air on Monday. On Monday, much drier, a very crisp feel. And then eventually we kind of see a little bit of an increase as we go to Tuesday, Wednesday. It might turn less dry. But then maybe another front or some other type of drier push of air comes in for the second half of next week. And that's how we can get to kind of round 2. Next week has a couple of rounds of drier air. The first round kicks in Monday. The second round kicks in after next Wednesday. So a lot to like about that. What you could deal with refreshing air next Thursday morning, delightfully dry air next Friday morning, and a pretty comfortable conditions in the area next Saturday. So a lot to look forward to next week. Looks like the majority of next week could be a nice fall feel. So we're going to switch gears and talk about the tropics now and take a look at hurricane season 2025 and where we stand so far. First of all, the next available name on the list is Gabrielle. So we've seen 6 named storms so far this year. Andrea, Barry, Chantal, Dexter, Aaron, Fernand. The 7th named storm, Gabrielle, has not formed yet based on the latest information. But what we are finding is there's an area of disturbed tropical weather, some tropical activity, an area of tropical activity out in the middle of the Atlantic. And the National Hurricane Center gives that a high chance to develop heading into the next 7 days. Also, there's this other area, a hurricane in the Pacific. That's Pacific Hurricane Lorena, which is going to make landfall in Baja California. Some of the energy and remnants of that might get kicked off toward the east. And remember, next week we are tracking this weekend we are tracking a cool front to try to move into the area around Sunday. So some of the moisture, the remnant moisture from Lorena, might be in the area at the same time as that cool front comes down toward our coast. And perhaps that might help to boost some of the rain chances in parts of the region. But we'll learn more about that in the coming days. Right now we're just focused out in the Atlantic waters. There's our area of disturbed tropical weather right there. You know, I'm just looking at this. I don't really see anything that looks terribly organized, but we definitely have the consolidation of enhanced thunderstorm activity. So the thunderstorms are becoming more concentrated, and maybe if the pressures could begin to fall, you'll get the wind circulation to become better defined, and maybe a center might try to form there. So there's a look at the computer modeling with that area, which it could become a depression or storm today or tomorrow, but it's more likely to do it as we get closer to the weekend. And you're noticing the computer modeling just showing general broad circulation for Thursday, Friday, but then eventually that circulation later Friday does become a lot better organized, and it does look like a depression or a storm is forming based on our computer modeling there heading into Saturday. So maybe that's Gabrielle, if that's the name that this one will take. Very compact, not many widespread thunderstorms, a very compact possible system there, but a circulation is noted with the computer modeling. Now we can take some of our longer range computer models from there, which by the way, both agree on the placement of that. So we have our high res models and our low res models in agreement with the placement of that through Saturday. So some good model agreement on the placement, even though there might not be as much agreement on the intensity. But let's show you, we got two different scenarios here, the GFS computer model scenario, the European computer model scenario, showing where this tropical activity, maybe a depression, maybe a storm, where it might go. And as we go through time, we're seeing both models in pretty good agreement through early next week. Now this is, basically a week away from today, Thursday, September 11th, and we're still finding this possible system located to the east of Puerto Rico. There's Puerto Rico right there, and this system is located either 200 miles east of Puerto Rico or 500 miles southeast of Puerto Rico, depending on which scenario winds up panning out. But in general, you have that possible system located very close to the Lesser Antilles, 7 days from today. So that's how slow we're going to be moving here. I'm going to come back and do how many more Waking Up with Wesley's before this thing even touches the Lesser Antilles possibly. We're going to come back on Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's 5 more Waking Up with Wesley's in the future until this possible system is close to the Lesser Antilles. So it's not going to move anywhere in a hurry. We've got a long time to watch the possible development of this. I will say though that the GFS, if you watch some of the earlier episodes of Waking Up with Wesley when we showed the GFS earlier this week, it had a scenario that had, today it's showing it by Puerto Rico Thursday, but earlier this week it was showing it well to the north of that. And it was even turning it basically to the northeast of Bermuda. But now that model has trended way farther south than what it was showing earlier this week. And it's more in line with the European model, which has mainly stayed a little bit farther south. When it comes to tropics, you want to see these things turning north before getting too close to North America. So that's not a good sign that we are seeing the model trends a little farther south now compared to earlier this week. And then we're going to push it out to basically as far as we can. So this is the farthest out in the future, or furthest out in the future that the model can go, Saturday, September 13th. And, we basically have a possible system located near or just to the north of Puerto Rico by the time we get to next weekend, Saturday, September 13th. Again, I would have liked it if the model did not trend more south, because that would have meant that instead of seeing the GFS like this, we would have been seeing the GFS a little bit like that and turning away. But instead, we are seeing a little bit more of a southerly track with the latest trends. And to me, that's not a good sign right now. Hopefully that trend does not continue, and hopefully we can see that change again in the future. But that's as far out into the future as we can see, and we'll just have to keep checking back to learn about what ultimately might happen after next weekend. But it does look like we'll at least get through the first half of September with no impacts to the Gulf Coast. From now through September 15th, it's unlikely that there's going to be any type of major system impacting the Gulf Coast. But you go beyond that too much, and it's unclear, since we are nearing the peak of hurricane season. And anytime you're near the peak of hurricane season, pretty much all bets are off. Storms can form wherever they want to form. Big storms can form wherever they want to form, anywhere in the Gulf, the Caribbean, or the Atlantic. And anywhere is up for grabs for landfalls once you're near the peak of hurricane season. But hopefully our lucky streak, if you will, continues, and hopefully we continue to be spared from any significant tropical weather as we get deeper into the month of September. Hurricane season does not officially end until November 30th. Well, that'll pretty much do it for today's edition of Waking Up with Wesley. I've been Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. We'll see you again next time.
Waking Up with Wesley has been sponsored by Exclusive Auto Brokers. For the best deals on wheels, visit Exclusive Auto Brokers on Beatline Road in Long Beach.